And I'd just like to acknowledge as well our partners in the series. So we've got Royal Life Saving Society Australia, Commercial Aquatics Australia, OTM Sport and Leisure Planning Group, YMCA Victoria, the Victoria State Government Health and Human Services Department, Belgravia Leisure, Cleaning Melbourne, VACA, Aligned Leisure, our Watch Around Water accredited facilities, EcoSave, and of course Western Leisure Services. I can see you there, Barry. Hello. I'll just turn off the video there. Okay, so today we've got Alison Dixon, CEO of Western Leisure Services. Next Thursday we have Leadership in Uncertain Times with Professor Emma Sherry, who's Professor at Swinburne University and the President of Tennis Victoria. The following week we have Nathan Burke, who's the Western Bulldogs women's senior coach for the AFL, talking about culture and values. We've got Tony Walker, ASM, who's the CEO of Ambulance Victoria, the following week talking about mental health and building resilience. So lessons learned from trauma, highly applicable to anyone in the industry, having been through significant critical incidents in the past myself in a management capacity. Would highly recommend going through some sort of trauma type training prior to. It's much better to have a roadmap when these events happen. So today we've got Alison, as I mentioned, and this session is on the local government enterprise model of leisure management and just some navigating the current challenges. So Alison's been kind enough to speak candidly about some of the challenges that Western Leisure Services have been navigating, sort of sitting in an exemption space around JobKeeper. So Alison, thanks for coming on today and talking to us. It's great to have you. We're very pleased to be partnered with Western Leisure Services on a number of initiatives. And I'd just like, if some of the listeners aren't familiar with yourself or Western Leisure Services, it'd be great to just hear a bit of a quick summary of who you are and a bit about Western Leisure Services and what you guys do.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, RJ, and thanks for having me. It's nice to be here today. I might just start with a little bit of background about Western Leisure Services. So Western Leisure Services is about 5 years old. The Wyndham City Council made a decision in 2013-14 to go down the local government enterprise model, and in 2014 we started the company and opened 9 months later in 2015. So that was an absolute whirlwind ride of 9 months to get a business from, we started in a little corner of the Wyndham City Council offices with, a couple of laptops, a couple of mobile phones and not much else, and developed the business into, what it is 5 years down the track with the current and past leaders and staff in the business. So it's been a wonderful business to be part of, and seeing it grow from these early stages of having no members to at the end of February having about 9,000 members. So it's been a great journey, and just seeing the business grow and develop over that time, and also see the relationship with council to grow and develop over that time. Because it's a model that's not widely used. I think it's fair to say it took us all a bit of time to get used to that model, work out how the relationship would work and the governance structures behind that. But we're here today, and we've got a great relationship with our council, and also a wonderful relationship with our board. So it's a great place to be. In terms of my background, I started my working career in the banking industry in frontline customer service role, and was there for a few years before I branched off into my HR career, which started in Australia, and went back to uni and got some postgrad qualifications in HR and IR, which really springboarded my career in HR. I worked both in the private sector and the public sector. So in the private sector, have been in the engineering, pharmaceuticals, hospitality industry. That was with Lion Nathan, AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals, and then I moved into local government after the birth of my second child. I found a job which was perfect for me at the time, and it also was closer to home, so I could spend more time with my children rather than the commute into the city every day. And really spent time in strategic and operational HR, IR, learning and development, risk and safety, insurance, to name a few. And then so I was working with Windham Council when Western Leisure Services was conceived, and the opportunity arose there for me to move to Western Leisure Services in a wider role, so corporate services role, which encompassed finance and IT, as well as the HR and risk that had been used to. Did that for 4 years under the leadership of Bruce Mackay, who I'm sure many of you know, and then just in the last couple of years, or nearly 2 years, took on the role of CEO, which has been a wonderful experience. And despite the challenges of the last few months, I think I can honestly say that I love my job, and I love what I do, and I love the people I work with. So it's been it has been very challenging, but I'm really looking forward to the future.
Wow, what a diverse career, spanning a whole bunch of industries, and obviously that depth and breadth has been highly useful. It's actually a lot wider than I was expecting. I think that's fantastic, and it's great to have you here. So just to fill in our listeners, so we've got a few questions prepared that I'd just like to ask Alison about navigating the current challenges and the model. So Alison, if you don't mind, I'll sort of ask you the first question here. So as the crisis unfolded, there was somewhat of a uniform approach to standing employees down across managed facilities in Victoria, so those that were managed by a management company. However, many metropolitan councils seem to keep a lot of their leisure staff engaged through alternative roles within the council or within the leisure facilities themselves. JobKeeper kicked in somewhere down the track, which supported management companies significantly, but not councils or importantly, in your case, council-owned enterprises. Am I right that this meant that your organisation did not really get any of the support available, either in terms of a stimulus or wider retrenchment opportunities?
Yes, so yes, you are correct, RG. In our case, when the JobKeeper, I'll talk about JobKeeper. First of all, when JobKeeper was announced initially, I have to say I was quite excited about that, because I knew that would be the difference between us having to stand down staff or not. And we registered, I think the day it was announced, we had registered by that evening and were one of the first to register. But always we were very careful. There were a couple of hurdles that you had to go through. One was that you had to be eligible for JobKeeper as an organisation, and then the other was that the employee themselves had to be eligible based on the criteria that had been communicated at that time. So the communication, we're very careful about the communications to our staff, and it was always about if we are eligible. Because as we all know, small print can change, and it's certainly been the case throughout this process. On very short time range and having to respond, but so they announce something and then the fine detail comes later, and and unfortunately, about 10 days later, when there was an update to it which excluded companies that were wholly owned subsidiaries of local government. That was this last few months has been a series of highs and lows, and I have to say that was a pretty low day when we found out that we wouldn't be eligible for JobKeeper. And to be honest, for me it was difficult to understand. And the more I hear about JobKeeper, it's been fantastic for some people, but there are sectors of the community and cohorts of workers who have not been able to benefit from that. Difficult for me to understand in our situation, because we are a private company, we have an independent board, financially independent of council, and we have our own governance structures. We're not, we're not party to council's EBA. All of these things that indicate we are a private and independent company, but yet we weren't able to access that funding. So that was really difficult. And I have to say, council have been very supportive of us from the start. They're really trying to help us in any way they can. And in this situation, they quickly worked with us to try and advocate for some change to the JobKeeper, or at least find us something that would be equivalent to JobKeeper. Unfortunately, none of that eventuated into any difference for us. So it left us in a position where we were going to have to stand down staff.
So it sounds like sounds pretty, well, obviously heartbreaking, and significant impacts for the business and its people. So I think, you know, from what I've observed as kind of an observer on the sidelines across the industry, is, you know, for the management companies, once JobKeeper kicked in, they were able to mobilize staff and get them working on projects and so on and so forth. You know, I know the YMCA was lucky to partner with Coles, I think it was, and they were able to, you know, retrench a whole bunch of their staff temporarily into the grocery stores, which was, you know, fantastic for them. But a lot of the council leisure staff, I know just speaking with colleagues that, you know, the City of Yarra, for example, all of their staff were still working, all of their permanent staff, including, you know, part-time lifeguards and part-time, you know, customer service officers, etc. And all at City of Darwin was the same. City of Melbourne, I believe, similar. And I think a number of other councils have contacted us to let us know sort of their circumstances. A lot of staff were retrenched into, you know, cleaning crews and, you know, walking around the community and you know, cleaning high touch point surfaces. I was on my way into work today. I could see teams of them out in the City of Melbourne cleaning, you know, crosswalks and so on and so forth. Were there any opportunities or invites to Western Leisure Services staff to take up opportunities with the local council, just out of curiosity?
To date, no, that there haven't. Council are looking at opportunities. So, you know, just as an example, recently they have a lot of school crossing supervisors, and now that schools are back, but many of their school crossing supervisors are in a high vulnerability, you know, classification. So they are, whenever they have opportunities, they are certainly making us aware of them so that we can at least send them out to our employees and give them a chance to apply. The other complication is that many of the councils, I think, have been applying for the Working for Victoria funding. For some councils, that funding has come through, and for others, that funding hasn't come through yet. So I'm confident that if and when that funding comes through, it might create some other opportunities for our staff. But unfortunately, the timing was really difficult for us and really challenging. We and council were keen to continue paying our staff for as long as we possibly could. But you know, with a business that's 5 years old, yes, in February we were in a really strong position. So our performance was, you know, year-on-year improvement in our performance. Financially, we were doing really well. Everything, you know, we were almost on a springboard to the future, and it just you know, all stopped when we had to close our centres. So it's all about timing, and it's not over yet. We've still got you know, we have started to re-engage our staff just in the last week, but there are, you know, because of the restrictions that will be in force when we open, we won't have the number of shifts and the, you know, number of opportunities internally that we would have had when we're fully up and running. We'll get back there, but it'll take some time. So we're just continually looking for opportunities for the staff through either Working for Victoria, and many of our staff have signed up for that and have, you know, and I know that they are being contacted about any suitable opportunities. And we'll just continue to work closely with council to see what opportunities there are.
Yeah. Okay. So look, it certainly sounds like there's been quite the journey over this period and significant challenges for your organisation. that's not to say that the councils haven't had, similar challenges, and I'm sure there's been all sorts of borrowing and other types of activities to help maintain that payroll. I have no doubt that that's the case. It's interesting, that because of the independence of the company, that there is that sort of at arm's length approach to the people, which is understandable. I mean, that's part of I assume part of the impetus for forming a local government enterprise is to create that little bit of insulation from that risk. It's obviously very hard to plan for a crisis like this. So how has this crisis now informed the future planning for Western Leisure Services? Do you think you will be looking to create, a bit of a hedge fund or some sort of fund to hedge against future crises?
Yeah, I do. I just think before I talk about that, I might just talk a little bit more about the journey and the challenges that it's taken us to get to this point, and then that might lead to the how we plan for the future.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yes. So before the government announced the closures, we'd all started to hear about COVID-19 in the news, and it was getting closer and closer, and we could see the writing on the wall. And we've got a very well established crisis management team, and we got that team together, or members of that team together, to start to plan what we knew was about to happen. And we also worked very closely with council to make sure, again, we are at arm's length, but we are a subsidiary, and from the community's perspective, sometimes they understand that we're different and sometimes they don't, and it's really up to us to make sure that we communicate with the community effectively. So council let us know what their decisions were going to be around some of their libraries and community centres, and we made the decision to close our centre at the same centres at the same time that they did. So that was a few days before the government actually announced that we would have to close them, and that gave us a really good opportunity to communicate with our members in advance, communicate with our staff, and put some plans in place to have the centres closed as smoothly as we could. As I said before, it was the last few weeks have been a series of highs and lows, and one of the absolute highs was the minute we announced that we were closing our centres. I've never seen innovation like it. So our team immediately activated, and the ideas were flowing. How can we keep in touch with our members? How can we reach the wider community? They really believe in what we do, which is building healthy lives, and the innovation and the thinking around that. And not only that, but the way that they were able to mobilise and activate things so quickly was incredible. And so we had the highs of that, and then we had the lows of JobKeeper. So it's been a challenge for everybody, I'm sure, not personally and professionally, just managing that. But we found ourselves in a position where we just couldn't continue to pay staff. I think we paid all our staff for about 7 weeks, and then it got to the point where we couldn't continue to do that for staff that we didn't have meaningful work for. So there was a cohort of staff, about 82% of our workforce, that we had to stand down towards the end of April, and then we continued with the rest of the staff for another 2 weeks, and again it just got to the point where we couldn't continue that, and had to stand down our staff to the point where we only had people who were doing essential work. So it was a very small cohort of staff looking at back of house, facility maintenance, recovery planning, and a group that were looking at our online programs, which included our Find Your 30 program, and just trying to reach as many members of the community to keep them as active during this period. So it's, and I was saying to RJ before that this business crisis or business continuity event, whatever we call it, is very unique in that most occasions when there is a business crisis event, it's a business continuity event, it affects the business. So, you know, at the beginning of the year, we had mud rain, we had smoke haze, we had some things to deal with that affected the business, and we had to close the doors, you know, for a couple of days here and there. In this situation, this is an event that affects everybody, not just professionally, but personally. So I think no matter who you are or what you do, you're either concerned about your own finances, the finances of friends and relatives, the social isolation, not being able to see family sometimes that may be in very vulnerable positions. You've got parents trying to work from home. School was closed, so there was children being, you know, at home learning. There were so many other things for people to consider, as well as the business continuity. So I think, you know, it's fair to say that it's been extremely challenging for everybody. In amongst all of that, the team at WLS has been wonderful in very difficult circumstances, and you know, to continue to work in the best interest of the organisation despite all these challenges. So really, we had a very small cohort of people who were then trying to focus on these 4 areas that I mentioned, and that was, you know, looking at all the different scenarios that might happen, when we could open, what it might look like. What extra staff or resources do we need in terms of the safety of patrons and staff? And it's been an enormous amount of work by a few people, but also other staff who were really keen. Even though they'd been stood down, they were really keen to continue and do some, you know, unpaid work to help the organisation, and I'm very grateful and thankful for our workforce. So just that, you know, remaining committed, remaining resilient, and a real genuine care for our members, and I think that goes 2 ways. Our members, you know, we've had many calls from our members. They care about us, and we care about them, and it is that sort of relationship. So in terms of you know, could we have planned for this better? How did we do all the planning for this? I think my answer to that is, although we didn't know that this was going to be the crisis, we've been planning for a crisis unconsciously for 5 years. So, you know, I think my thoughts around this, my advice or my thinking is that, you know, we have to plan for whatever the future might bring, and the best way to do that is to have the best team around you that you can have. So, you know, have people around you, employ the people who want your job, and hire for fit. So we have a bit of a statement that we hire for fit and train for skill, and I stand by that every time. If you've got the right people with the right attitude and the ability to learn, and that can bring new ideas to the business, we can train them in the technical aspects of the role. So I think, but looking at from WLS's point of view, I think even with the best plans in place, being a relatively young business, there's not too much we could have done differently in terms of where we are now, but it's really just about how we then recover as quickly as we can. And you know, we had we planned for a closure of this length of time? No, we hadn't, but we have got very robust systems in place that have allowed us to you know, quickly respond to what we've needed to respond to, but at the same time activate some new thinking, some new ideas, getting our online programs, you know, contacting our members, and I think we've done as best we can in the circumstances. In terms of how we think that will inform our future planning, as we do with any crisis or any whether it's a real crisis or a you know, something that a mock crisis, if you like, we'll look at what went well. So even now, as we go through our regular meetings with the team, we always stop and think, was there any learnings today that we can capture, that we can then build into something in the future. So we'll look at what went well, what didn't go well, and what can we learn from. And one of the things I've said throughout this process to the team, and I say it to myself, is this is not going to be perfect, but it's going to be the best that we can do. So I don't want people to worry about not doing something because it's not perfect, when with the best intentions we'll do what we can. So we'll look at, yeah, as I said, what we've done well, what didn't go well, what have we done differently during this period that we can continue to do at the other side of this. One thing, and I don't think we'll be unique in this area, but certainly something I'm very proud of at WLS is that in a crisis, it brings out the best in people, and it brings out the best in terms of teamwork and commitment and resilience and ideas. And the challenge or the question for us is, how can we harness that? We couldn't continue with this sort of level of work for indefinitely, but how can we harness the best of this and the ideas and the way that we've managed to turn ideas into reality very quickly. Sometimes things that we've been hoping to do for 5 years, but all of a sudden we've done them in weeks. So how can we harness that and make the most of it? And I think then, taking all of that, we had planned to have a board and exec strategic planning session before COVID hit. We've postponed that for the moment, but it's about taking all of that information and what we've learned about ourselves and the community and into that session while it's still fresh. So I think that's how we would plan for the crisis and the future planning.
You've touched on a lot of really great sort of information. Let's call them information snacks. I think looking at the people, not just current but past, in your organization, there's been a really, what you're saying about choosing the right team and hiring for fit. There's been some really quite dynamic and talented people who work there currently, who have worked there in the past. Certainly a number of colleagues and former colleagues of myself, going back to when it started up, Alex being there along the journey, a lot of deep respect for Alec and how he thinks and how he can execute strategically and operationally. Going back to Sam Benfell, Jake De Silva, lots of really clever people at every level and in each portfolio. I look at some of the marketing, the people of Win Active, following sort of the people of New York City. I've always enjoyed, a lot of the marketing materials that you do, the webinar series that you guys are doing for your community straight away. Amy Cross, who's across there looking after the aquatic side of things, and even this year, Werribee Outdoor Pool becoming a platinum pool with us, achieving that accreditation hurdle, all sorts of really clever applications, lots of accolades and awards. It's been really sad as an observer, and particularly with colleagues and friends working there, to hear how heavily you guys have been impacted, because I truly believe in many respects you guys are absolutely market leaders across a range of things that you do and activities. So my encouragement is keep going. You will rebuild, absolutely. I have a profound and deep respect for what you guys do. We've obviously had Bruce on the show previously and Alec. I'd encourage everyone to listen to those seminars. We'll have Barry on in a couple of weeks as well. So there's definitely things that everyone can learn from the team over there. What do you think some of the positive changes will be from this for your organization in particular?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, as an industry as a whole, I think there's definitely there's innovation in there and real opportunities to, I think there's a lot of collaboration within the industry already, but I think this creates another opportunity to have a deeper level of collaboration and share some of the innovative ideas that have come up through this crisis. For us, it's the innovation. So we have our values are service, innovation and safety, and you know, every day and every minute of the day, we live service and safety, and have done. And innovation's been one that has been. It's not that we don't have innovation. We've done lots of things over the 5 years, but it's really come to the fore during this crisis. So I think that some of the things that we've done since we closed, and you've touched on some of them, Margie. So our Connect programme, which is where we're just calling up our members just to check in, a welfare check to make sure that they're okay. Our website relaunch, that was a really important project for us, because it meant that we had immediate access to update our website ourselves rather than going through a third party. And there's been an enormous amount of work to get that where you know, in a very short period of time. As you talked about the webinars that Barry's leading, and that's reaching out to lots of different members within our community, and just having a chat with them about how they're coping with COVID-19 and any tips. The Find Your 30, which was a part of our online offering. So all of these things, and you know, and again, as you touched on, RJ, in amongst all of that, we got our Platinum Pro for Werribee Outdoor Pro, which was certainly another high in this in these highs and lows. So it's really, again, as I said, it's harnessing the energy and the enthusiasm that's been created during this period, but also, you know, really analysing what we have done and which product, services, programs have we instigated that we will continue, that have a place beyond when we reopen the centres. Because I think what we've learned is there are we've had a great reach to not only members but people who are currently not members of our centres, and there's been a real opportunity to find out what's important to them, how we can reach them and provide them services and programmes that we weren't offering in the past. So I think that's where the opportunity and the change for good will come.
Yeah, so you're kind of touching a little bit there on my next question, which is, are you exploring, or have you prioritized any activities to try and explore, you know, new market opportunities or access new customers, or is the focus on just purely on retention at the moment? I'm a little bit out of it now by a couple of years. I'm keen to you know, hear from you guys what you think the balance and the mix is there.
Yeah, so this, I mean, there's certainly a priority on our existing members, and you know, obviously we have restrictions in place, so what we're trying to do is create opportunities for as many of them to come back within the current restrictions, creating different payment methods, and you know, so because there is in Wyndham there's a 27% unemployment rate. So there's a massive amount of our community that will have been affected by COVID-19, and they may not have the financial means that they had prior to the pandemic. So focusing on them, ways that we can get them back to our centres that works for them, but also keeping that online presence in the meantime until people feel safe coming back, and they also have the means to come back. So there'll be this blended approach for the foreseeable future, and that may end up being part of our the online may end up being part of our permanent offering. The other thing one of the things that we've done, I think I mentioned before, things that we've been really thinking about for a few years, but really hasn't come to top priority. One of them was an online booking system. We've managed without that up until now, but we can't manage with that within the new environment. So again, a very quick turnaround, the team have been able to get an online booking system which is just about ready to go, and it'll be ready by the time that we open. So these are some of the priorities, but also I think I said before that this has given us a bit of an insight into our members, but also people who are not members, and our marketing will definitely be prioritised in as we come back, and that's about marketing, using all the data and information that we have to find out what it is that that are the people who are currently not members, what is it that they want and need, and how can we deliver that to them in a way that works for them? So they'll be some of the priorities.
Okay, so just to throw out to the listeners as well. So I've got one more question of my own for Alison. Thank you, Alison, for indulging me in asking all of these questions. But if you've got a question for Alison about the model, or just could be across. I'm sure there's the. If you've got a question, if you've never had the chance to ask a CEO a question, you might avail yourself of the opportunity now. But if you just drop into the comments section any question, I'd be happy to read that out to Alison. In the meantime, Alison, what in terms of the LGE model and thriving in the next normal, which is, I think we're undoubtedly entering a period of increased volatility, whether that be due to climate crises or financial or pandemic. I think the trend seems to be increased volatility. Do you think the LGE model is the perfect model as is to continue to address those challenges, or do you think there's a need for councils with LGEs to create an environment that allows the model to thrive, given that, and you touched on this earlier, that the community don't care whether it's an independent company or not, that, as far as they're concerned, it's a council service in a council building to ratepayers. What do you think the next steps are? Should councils be bringing things closer again, or do you think the current crisis in terms of the JobKeeper exemption is sort of unique enough that it's unlikely to be an issue in the future?
Yeah, thanks, RJ. Well, I'd start by saying there is no perfect model. So I think every model, and I've only worked in this one, so I don't have inside information into the other models, but I would say that I'm sure there's no such thing as a perfect model. So every one of the models has its positives and has its drawbacks, and the LGE model is no different. But I think I think in terms of Wyndham and what this model brings to Wyndham, for the last 5 years, and particularly just as I said, just before COVID hit, the benefits of this model and the strengths were really coming to fore. And but I think what needs to happen now is that we continue to work on the relationship. This model is about the relationship between us and council and the board, making sure that we all understand the model, and that can be challenging because as people leave organisations and take that knowledge with them, and new people come in, it's really about re-establishing that again, because it is quite a unique model and it's not widely known or understood. So I think the parties have to accept the pros and cons, be aware of, we have an awareness now that we didn't have before, which was that in the COVID-19 situation, what we didn't realise at the start was that federal and state government would view wholly owned subsidiaries as council businesses and council employees. That's something new. So that's something we probably need to sit around the table with council and just talk about what have we learned now through this process, and how that impacts on the model that we didn't know before. But I think that the important thing for us and for council, together with our board now, is to work together to get WLS back to being independent as soon as possible, so we can return to our pre-COVID successes, but also evolve the business into something different down the track. But I still think that the reasons that Wyndham Council, I can't speak for any other council, but I think the reasons that Wyndham Council had for establishing the local government model still exist. I think we certainly have a strong support from our council and have throughout this process had that support from them. As I said before, we've got a wonderful board, and I think between the management of WLS, our board and council, that the model still makes a lot of sense, and we'll get back to that in the near future.
Yeah, I think you've made some really good points there. I'm sure the lawyers are somewhere in the background figuring out how we can sort of adjust or tweak to make it fit the box. Although I assume and hope this has been a unique circumstance, but very interesting. Certainly, you know, we've been thinking of you guys over here, and councils. You know, a lot of our key partners are councils and council organisations or council-owned organisations, and it's obviously been really tough on everyone. So you know, certainly with us, we've been thinking of you guys, and I'm glad to hear that there's an optimism there as well. So. If anyone's got a question, please drop it into the chat. I can see, you know, quite a few familiar names there. I'm sure there's some questions that could come through, but so far nothing. That doesn't mean that people don't have questions. It could be that they're listening to this on a walk or something on a mobile device. So if nothing comes through, Alison, I'd just like to thank you very much for making yourself available to talk today with us and with the wider industry. Obviously, you were more than willing to talk about some really difficult topics as well, and there's obviously some sensitivities around all of it. So thank you for being, you know, very open and candid with us and tackling some of the tougher questions for your organisation on this webinar. We've just had some positive praise come through. Sheila Langley, always a pleasure, Alison, listening to your honesty, optimism, and vision. Thank you. So that probably reflects how a lot of us feel over here at LSV and out there. No further questions, but thanks again, Alison, on behalf of Fitness Australia and Lifesaving Victoria for coming on the webinar today. If there's anything, in your view, is there anything that, you know, peak associations and peak bodies like LSV and ARV and SRV, is there anything that you would sort of throw out to us in terms of support or anything that we can do? Because I'm sure I'm talking about increased volatility for you and the industry, but it's also for us. What kind of support would you sort of like to see with us?
I think yeah. So again, you know, thanks for having me, RG. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, and you know, and there is, despite the fact there's been ups and downs, I think all of this time, and that, you know, when I say there's been ups and downs, there have been some real challenging moments along the way. But I think we've always held, you know, we always know that this will pass. It's not forever. It might take a while, but we do know that we'll get back and we'll be bigger and better than we've been in the past. So there is definitely that sense of optimism from the team. In terms of the peak bodies, there's a couple of things. One is in the current environment, because there is so much information flying around, and some of it changes daily. Some of it changes one day and changes again the next day, and you know, we're always having to be very conscious of, in our situation, looking at you know, not only what the federal and the state government are announcing, but also some of the other bodies, you know, Basketball Australia, Basketball Victoria, the Australian Institute of Sport. There's so much information and still a bit of ambiguity about what we can, you know, what we can open and when. It's just really navigating that. So any support from any of the peak bodies in relation to that is always very welcome, and the advocacy that comes with that from our peak bodies. So knowing that we can approach our peak bodies, and on our behalf they will try and advocate for either clarity or change. I think that's really important. I think also going into this new environment, which is, with working again using the Safe Work Australia guidelines about our return in the COVID-19 environment. Bodies like LSV just sharing with us what is best practice out there, what they see other organisations or centres doing, and it's that collaboration that I talked about before. It's there's little value in us all trying to reinvent the wheel when we can share from each other. So I think being that central point where we can share ideas and learn from each other is really important.
Yeah, it's definitely something, a challenge as well. Carolyn Morris spoke to us this time last week about harmonisation as well of the various frameworks and standards that have been sent out, and I'm sure that that's a common theme. So we have not so far been engaged on the safe return to swimming, but we have been engaged for the next stage to provide some input. So we've engaged Western Leisure Services. We've got the safety experts there, as well as a number of other councils and management organisations to provide that input. So we're hoping that the next round will reflect a bit more industry input of restriction easing. So that is a positive in that space, and hopefully we can continue to advocate. Obviously, the questions come through from one of the listeners about red tape, which I won't go into too much, but Michelle, the red tape is at all levels, and every industry and every organisation is navigating that at the moment, and there's a real top-down approach to announcements and how that all works. So it's no more than 20, it's 3 per lane. It's not how wide is the lane, how long is the lane, how big is the space, how wide, how many can you fit in under the 4 meter square. It's much more sort of cap focused rather than like capping the numbers rather than what can the environment support. So noting that, we're working with industry for the next round. But in any case, that looks to be the extent of the questions coming in. Alison, once again, thank you so much for making yourself available. Thank you so much for answering these questions and having a very optimistic approach. It's been great. It's been great to discuss, and just so you know, everyone, in my personal life, I'm a former bagpiper, so we were talking about all things Scotland before the show, and I appreciate you indulging me there as well, Alison, and talking about Edinburgh and so on and so forth. Thank you, everyone. We'll end the session here, and if you just hit the little red hang up button, that will close you out. Thanks once again, Alison.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Archie.